The cafe was quiet that morning until a powerful woman in designer heels collapsed across the floor. People gasped, phones snapped into the air, and only one man moved, a carpenter in worn boots, clutching his daughter's hand. He didn't know her name, didn't know that she was Clara Harrington, one of the nation's most feared CEOs. He only knew that she wasn't breathing. As he carried her to his old pickup, sirens wailing in the distance, a single envelope slipped from her coat pocket, 3 words scrawled across the top: 3 months left. In that moment, David Miller, a widowed single dad, had no idea that saving her life would change his own forever, and that love could rewrite even the cruelest of deadlines. David Miller had grown used to the quiet rhythm of small-town mornings, the creak of his workshop's wooden door, the smell of sawdust clinging to his flannel shirt, and the sound of his daughter Lily humming while packing her school bag. At 42, he carried the look of a man who had weathered too many storms, a carpenter with calloused hands, a widower who had buried his wife after a brutal fight with cancer, and a single father determined to raise a bright-eyed little girl with more love than money could buy. Beneath his steady smile lay a current of fear, fear of losing someone else, fear of being left alone again. That fear was his constant shadow, though he rarely let Lily see it. On the other side of town, Clara Harrington's world had just shattered. At 38, she was the type of woman whose name carried weight in every boardroom. Newspapers called her the Iron Lady of Finance. Her company's empire stretched across cities, her every decision capable of moving markets. Surgery wouldn't save her. Treatments offered only fractions of time. The words clung to her chest, suffocating. Clara had walked out with sunglasses shielding her eyes, her phone buzzing with bored updates she could not bring herself to answer. She wandered without aim until she slipped into a modest cafe tucked at the corner of Main Street. She sat by the window, hands trembling around a cup of untouched coffee, and for the first time in decades, allowed herself to cry. David entered moments later, balancing a toolbox. One of the cafe's old chairs had snapped, and the owner, an old friend, had called him in to fix it. He didn't notice the woman at first, just another customer hiding behind dark glasses. But Lily, always quick to notice sadness, tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, that lady is crying." Before David could stop her, Lily skipped over with the innocent confidence only a child could carry. She pulled a wrapped candy from her pocket, her last one, and placed it gently in front of the woman. "This candy always makes Daddy smile. Maybe it will help you too." Clara froze, caught off guard by the tiny hand and the earnest gaze. She tried to protest, but the words stuck in her throat. Slowly, she unwrapped the candy, and something inside her cracked open. She had signed billion-dollar deals without blinking, faced down hostile investors without flinching, but this child's simple kindness undid her. "Thank you," Clara whispered, her voice breaking, and Lily beamed before darting back to her father. David gave a quick apologetic nod, embarrassed by his daughter's boldness. Yet when his eyes met Clara's, he felt a flicker of recognition, not of her identity, but of her loneliness. He had seen that same hollowness in his own reflection after his wife died. As he bent to tighten the chair's bolts, his gaze caught something else, the way Clara's fingers brushed against the edge of his wooden ring. It was a plain band carved from oak, smoothed by years of wear. Clara's breath caught. "That ring. Where did you get it?" she asked softly. David looked up, surprised. "I made it myself, a long time ago. Just a habit. Really, I carve pieces when I need to keep my hands busy." Clara's eyes filled again. The design, the curve of the carving, it was almost identical to the ring her father had once made for her mother before he died. She hadn't seen one like it in decades. For a moment, the past collided with the present, a forgotten memory of family resurrected in the hands of a stranger. She pressed her lips together, unwilling to explain why it mattered, but David saw the shift in her expression. He didn't pry. Something about her told him she was carrying more than she wanted to reveal. The cafe owner bustled over, thanking David for the repair, while Clara quietly slipped out, leaving her coffee untouched. Yet as she walked into the brisk morning air, she felt the weight of her diagnosis sit differently. The doctor had given her 3 months to live, but here, in the span of a few minutes, a little girl's candy and a carpenter's ring had reminded her of something she thought she'd lost forever: the fragile, stubborn hope of family. Clara returned to the cafe a week later, though she told herself it was coincidence. She ordered tea this time, not coffee, and lingered by the window with her phone switched off. When she stepped outside, she noticed the modest sign across the street, Miller Woodworks. Curiosity nudged her forward. Inside, the air was rich with cedar and pine, dust motes drifting in warm light. David was bent over a workbench, shaping a piece of walnut, while Lily sat nearby coloring with markers. Clara hesitated at the door, but Lily spotted her first. "You came back," the girl cried, rushing over and tugging her hand as if they had always been friends. Clara allowed herself to be led inside. David straightened, wiping sawdust from his hands, and offered a cautious smile. "Looking for something specific?" he asked. Clara improvised. "Yes, I'd like to order some furniture. A desk, perhaps. Something personal." David nodded, treating her request without suspicion, though her tailored coat and polished shoes seemed out of place in the sawdust. She left that day with sketches and a quiet promise to return. And she did again and again. Soon, her visits were no longer about furniture. She lingered to watch David carve, to hear Lily chatter about school, to sit in a space where life felt uncalculated. For Clara, who lived by schedules and board meetings, Miller Woodworks became a pocket of stillness. One Saturday, Lily invited Clara to join their picnic at a nearby lake. Clara almost declined. She had meetings, emails, responsibilities. But then she caught the way Lily tilted her head, eyes wide with hope. "Please, Daddy makes the best apple pie." Something inside her softened. At the lake, Clara found herself barefoot on the grass, laughing as Lily showed her how to skip stones. David laid out simple sandwiches and a pie wrapped in foil, apologizing that it wasn't fancy. But to Clara, it was more than enough. She took a bite, sweet and tart, and nearly cried at the taste. She realized she hadn't eaten anything homemade in years. Later, Lily insisted they all play a board game. Clara, unused to such silliness, found herself competitive, laughing when she lost, cheering when Lily won. For the first time in months, her thoughts of doctors and deadlines faded. That night, back in her penthouse, she opened a leather-bound journal she hadn't touched in years. She wrote, "I built an empire, but I never built a home. Today I learned what it feels like to sit at a picnic blanket and belong." The next week, she returned to the workshop with cookies she had attempted to bake herself. The edges were burnt, but Lily declared them delicious, and David chuckled. Effort counts more than flavor. They spent the afternoon sanding a small jewelry box together. Clara clumsily followed David's instructions, and though her hands weren't steady, she felt a strange pride smoothing the wood. When Lily darted off to fetch crayons, she returned with a folded paper. "For you," she said, handing it to Clara. Clara unfolded the drawing and gasped softly. It showed 3 figures, a man, a woman, and a little girl, all holding hands under a bright sun. Above them, in Lily's careful handwriting, were the words "family of 3." The picture blurred as tears filled Clara's eyes. She pressed the paper to her chest, unable to speak. For years she had buried the ache of never having a family of her own. Now, faced with a child's innocent vision, she felt the weight of her diagnosis more acutely. Time was slipping away, yet here was a glimpse of the life she had always wanted and never dared to imagine. She excused herself quickly, stepping outside to breathe, pretending to answer a phone call so David wouldn't see her trembling. Behind her, through the open door, she heard Lily's laughter mingling with David's steady voice. The sound washed over her like a balm. It was the sound of belonging. She knew she should pull back, protect her heart, and shield theirs. But instead, she found herself returning again, each visit a thread weaving her into their lives. She was living on borrowed time, but in the Miller workshop, she had found something money had never given her: the beginnings of a family. The collapse came without warning. Clara was in the workshop with Lily, bent over the small jewelry box they had been crafting. Her smile was genuine as she guided Lily's tiny fingers along the sandpaper, teaching her how to smooth the edges. Then suddenly her hand slipped, the color drained from her face, and she crumpled onto the sawdust-strewn floor. Lily screamed. David dropped his hammer and rushed to her side, lifting her head gently. Her pulse was faint, her breathing shallow. Fear surged through him, dredging up memories of his wife's final days, the helplessness of watching someone fade. He scooped Clara into his arms and carried her to his truck while Lily sobbed in the back seat. "Daddy, don't let her die," she pleaded, her small hands clutching Clara's limp fingers. At the hospital, chaos erupted. Nurses recognized her instantly. "That's Clara Harrington," one whispered as they wheeled her inside. David froze. The name landed like a stone in his chest. He had heard it countless times on the news. CEO of Harrington Enterprises, one of the most powerful women in the country. How could this woman, who had been baking burnt cookies in his kitchen and laughing by the lake, be that Clara Harrington? Hours later, the truth surfaced. The attending physician, an older man with graying hair, pulled David aside. "She's been battling a rare form of cancer. The prognosis isn't good. I told her months ago 3, maybe 4 months left without treatment." The world tilted. David stared at the floor, hands clenched. "She knew? And she didn't tell us?" The doctor sighed. "She declined the experimental program we recommended. Said she wanted peace, not false hope." As the words sank in, a deeper blow followed. David recognized the doctor. He had been part of the team who treated his wife, the one who had quietly admitted there was nothing more they could do. History was repeating itself, only this time with someone who had walked unexpectedly into his heart. Later, in the dim hospital room, Clara opened her eyes to find David sitting stiffly in a chair, Lily curled asleep against his shoulder. Her voice was hoarse. "You know now." David didn't answer immediately. His jaw worked, emotions battling beneath his silence. Finally he said, "Why didn't you tell me? Why let Lily think you were part of us?" Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. "Because I wanted to feel alive again. For once, I wanted to be Clara, not Harrington, not a dying CEO, just a woman who could bake cookies badly and be teased for it." She reached for the folded drawing on the bedside table. The family of 3 Lily had given her. "I kept this because it felt real. I wanted to believe I could belong." David's heart twisted, torn between anger and empathy. He thought of Lily's laughter, of the way she had whispered "Mom" in her sleep more than once. How could he risk his daughter's heart when Clara was slipping away? His voice was harsh, sharper than he intended. "You should have been honest. You've put us in the middle of something I can't protect her from." Clara's hands trembled as she clutched the drawing. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd push me away before I could know what it felt like to be loved." The rawness of her confession pierced him. For a moment he saw not a CEO but a woman stripped of armor, clinging to a fleeting chance at belonging. Lily stirred then, half asleep, murmuring, "Don't let her be alone, Daddy." Her small voice cut through the tension like a blade. David closed his eyes, shoulders sagging. He wanted to protect his daughter, but he also knew what loneliness tasted like, how it hollowed a person. He couldn't deny Clara's humanity, not when she was fighting for scraps of time. Still, the fracture had formed. Trust was cracked, and the weight of unspoken decisions pressed down on them all. Clara lay back, tears slipping silently down her temples. She knew she might lose more than her life. She might lose the fragile family she had just begun to dream of. The days after Clara's collapse were heavy with silence. David tried to keep distance, telling himself it was safer for Lily's heart. But every night his daughter begged, "Can we see Clara tomorrow?" In the end, his resolve crumbled. He drove them back to the Harrington estate, where Clara now stayed under a nurse's watch. When Lily dashed inside with a bouquet of dandelions, Clara's face lit up in a way that no medicine could replicate. David saw it, and something inside him softened. He could not undo the truth of her illness, but he could decide how she would live whatever time remained. Slowly, he let her back into their routine. Together, they began to craft a bucket list that wasn't filled with grand gestures, but small, ordinary dreams. Clara admitted she had never baked a pie from scratch, so one Saturday they gathered in David's kitchen. Flour dusted the counters, Lily sang off-key as she cracked eggs, and Clara laughed until her sides ached. The pie came out lopsided, the crust burned on one side, but Clara declared it the best she had ever tasted. Another day, David brought out an old guitar. He strummed clumsily, singing a tune his wife used to hum, and Clara joined in softly, her voice shaky but sweet. The three of them sat on the porch steps as the sun dipped low, music mingling with the evening breeze. In those moments, Clara wasn't a CEO, wasn't dying. She was simply Clara, wrapped in the warmth of family. Yet David could not silence the gnawing thought that this would end too soon. One evening, as Clara dozed in the workshop, he noticed a folder half buried beneath her coat. It was her medical file. Against his better judgment, he read. Inside were notes about a clinical trial, an experimental treatment she had declined. His chest tightened. Memories of his wife's battle flooded back, of how he had watched her slip away, wishing there had been one more chance. He could not stand by and let Clara refuse hope. Quietly, he reached out to the trial coordinators himself, filling out paperwork she had abandoned. Days later, when he told her, she reacted with anger. "You had no right," she cried, voice breaking. "It's my body, my fight." David met her fury with calm but firm words. "You think I did this because I can't let go? You're wrong. I did it because Lily called you Mom in her sleep last night. She already loves you. And whether you want to admit it or not, you love her too. Don't tell me you're not willing to try for her." Clara's anger faltered, giving way to trembling silence. Her hands clenched the edge of the table, knuckles white. At last she whispered, "I wasn't afraid of dying, David. I was afraid of living long enough to hope, and then losing it all." He stepped closer, his voice gentler now. "Hope is all we've got. Don't throw it away. Let us fight with you. Let us be your family." Clara's tears spilled freely. In that moment, the fear she had carried alone cracked open, replaced by something stronger, the desire to stay, not for her empire, not for appearances, but for them. She reached for his hand, then for Lily's, who had been listening in the doorway, her eyes wide and wet. "Okay," Clara said softly, squeezing their fingers. "I'll try." For us. Soon after, tests revealed something unexpected. Clara carried a rare genetic marker that made her a more likely candidate for success with the treatment. The doctors, once cautious, now spoke with quiet optimism. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was more hope than she had dared to imagine. That night, Clara lay awake in the workshop's guest room, listening to Lily's gentle snores from across the hall. For the first time since her diagnosis, she didn't count days. She dreamed instead of mornings filled with pancakes, evenings by the lake, and the laughter of a child who believed in miracles. The weeks following Clara's decision to pursue treatment unfolded like a fragile dawn. She moved between the sterile hospital halls and the warmth of Miller Woodworks, clinging to both hope and the ordinary joys David and Lily wove into her days. The clinical trial began with grueling sessions that left her drained, but every time she returned to David's porch, Lily was there with drawings, stories, or a lopsided daisy crown that made Clara laugh despite the nausea. David carried the heavier load in silence, managing his workshop, caring for Lily, driving Clara to appointments, but he never complained. In the evenings, he would sit by her hospital bed, reading aloud from Lily's favorite book so Clara wouldn't feel the loneliness that echoed through sterile walls. For the first time, Clara wasn't fighting alone. Against the odds, the treatment began to stabilize her condition. Months passed, and the countdown she had once dreaded slipped quietly behind her. Instead of measuring time by what was left, she began to measure it by moments lived. Lily's laughter at the lake, the feel of David's hand steadying hers, the small miracle of waking up without pain. It was not a cure, but it was more life than she had dared to imagine. One evening, David surprised her with a project in the workshop. "I thought we could build something together," he said, placing planks of maple on the table. The three of them worked side by side, Lily hammering crooked nails, Clara sanding carefully, David guiding them both until a sturdy wooden table took shape. When they finished, they placed Lily's family of three, drawing in a frame at its center. Clara touched the smooth surface, her throat tight. "This is what I never had," she whispered, "and what I always wanted." David met her gaze. "You have it now." The truth of his words sank deep, healing wounds that money and power had never touched. Clara's transformation didn't stop at home. She returned to her office one final time, not to reclaim her empire, but to reshape it. At a press conference, she announced the creation of the Lily Foundation, named after the child who had taught her the meaning of family. Its mission was simple: to provide support for single parents and patients battling life-threatening illnesses who couldn't afford the fight alone. The announcement stunned the business world. Reporters expected a farewell to power. Instead, Clara offered a legacy built not on profits, but on compassion. Standing beside her, David wore his old carpenter's jacket, Lily clutching his hand. The image of the three of them together spread across newspapers, inspiring headlines about love outlasting fear. Months later, Clara was no longer the woman counting down days. She was the woman planting roses in David's yard, with Lily by her side, laughing when her hands grew muddy. She was the woman who stayed up late, helping Lily with school projects, who slipped her into bed with a kiss and whispered prayers of gratitude for mornings still to come. On a quiet evening, as twilight painted the workshop in shades of gold, David lit a lantern and set it on their handmade table. Clara sat across from him, her fingers tracing the ring of wood grain. "Do you ever think about how close I was to leaving this world?" she asked softly. David reached across, covering her hand with his. "Every day. And every day I thank God you're still here." Lily patted in with her sketchbook, holding up a new drawing. This time, a family of three plus a dog she hoped to adopt. They laughed, and Clara felt tears of joy rather than fear. In that moment, she understood something her doctors could never quantify. Love had already added life to her years. The legacy of Clara Harrington would not be a crumbling empire or a tragic headline. It would be a foundation that gave others hope, a wooden table carved by three pairs of hands, and a little girl's laughter echoing through a home filled with warmth. Once she had been given 3 months to live. Now she had been given something greater: a family, a reason to fight, and the chance to leave behind not wealth, but love. Once, Clara Harrington measured life in contracts and quarterly reports. Doctors told her she had only 3 months left, but love rewrote that sentence. With David's steady hands and Lily's innocent faith, she discovered something more powerful than wealth family. They built more than furniture in that small workshop. They built a legacy of hope, a reminder that even on borrowed time, love can add life to every breath. Clara's story is not about the end, but about beginnings born in the most unlikely places. Because sometimes the greatest fortune is not found in boardrooms, but at a wooden table where 3 people laugh together like a family. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more soul-stirring tales.